Welcome to the Leadership in Law podcast with host Marilyn Jenkins. Cut through the noise, get actionable insights and inspiring stories delivered straight to your ears. Your ultimate podcast for navigating the ever-changing world of law firm ownership. In each episode, we dive deep into the critical topics that matter most to you, from unlocking explosive growth to building a thriving team. We connect you with successful firm leaders and industry experts who share their proven strategies and hard-won wisdom. So, whether you're a seasoned leader or just starting your journey as a law firm owner, the Leadership in Law podcast is here to equip you with the knowledge and tools you need to build a successful and fulfilling legal practice.
Welcome to another episode of the Leadership in Law podcast. I'm your host, Marilyn Jenkins. Please join me in welcoming my guest, Hardeep Grover, to the show today. Hardeep is the principal attorney at CapEx Legal, where he acts as an on-demand chief legal officer for business enterprises across industries from Main Street to middle market. Hardeep works with businesses throughout the corporate lifecycle, including formations and structuring, commercial lease negotiations, trademark and copyright licensing, employment compliance, and M&A transactions. He currently serves on the board of directors of the Washington Area Lawyers for the Arts and serves on several committees with the D.C. Bar. He's the past president of the South Asian Bar Association of Washington, D.C. He received his J.D. from George Washington University Law School and his executive MBA from the Quantic School of Business and Technology. He lives in D.C. and actively practices in California, New York, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia. I'm excited to have you here, Hardeep. Welcome.
Thanks so much, Marilyn. I'm excited to be here too.
Fantastic. So let's get started. Just tell us a little bit about how you got started, and then we're going to dive into some AI.
How I got started in practice?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sure. No problem. So I after law school, I just kind of packed up my bags and showed up in California. And I worked there for a little while. And I was working for a couple of wineries and had a great time. But those wineries went under eventually just because they're a little bit smaller. And from there, I ended up moving to New York. I did litigation and I just absolutely hated litigation. It's just not for me. Obviously, we need litigators. It's just not what I'm meant for. So recognizing that, I kind of crafted a practice around things I love and things I like doing, the kind of businesses I like working with. And I started my practice around 8 years ago, and here we are today.
Great. Yeah. I always love hearing how someone niched down or chose what they wanted to do. And it's always interesting to hear when you tried something, hated it, and went in another direction.
Yeah. I mean, when I started my practice, what I noticed was there was just a lot of the legal market that was uncaptured. You know, the big firms cater to the IBMs and the Microsofts of the world, but there aren't that many law firms that cater directly to small and medium-sized businesses. And that just leaves a large portion of the American populace underserved. So I decided to focus on that subset of the American populace and those kinds of folks to work with. And initially, when I started, I had a lot of ties to the hospitality industry. So I started my practice as a food and beverage attorney, and I expanded from there. And I work with a variety of practice areas now, from medical and dental to art and entertainment, but really just anything and everything when it comes to business and nonprofit.
Very cool. So you help them get all the paperwork in order. I love that you do everything from formation to M&A. So in to out. That's perfect. That's great. And you're using AI in your practice now.
Yes, I am. I use it every day, frankly. It's been such a great resource for me. I'm a solo, and so I have to focus on efficiency both as a solo and as someone that caters to small business. My clients can't really afford $100,000 legal bills, and they can't really afford me to take all the time to get into the weeds. And so I have to find ways to be efficient so I can best serve them based on where they are and what their needs are. And AI has been a fantastic tool for me. So
Excellent. So when you're talking about that, so you're making sure that you are efficient, you're keeping the billing down so that your clients can afford you and get the legal assistance that they need. So what areas are you using AI in to be more efficient in?
I use it in a variety of areas, to be honest. And there are some low lift areas where it's extremely efficient and other areas where it helps me be a better attorney. And I'll start with the first one. Let's, think about proofreading, for example. If I draft a 70-page operating agreement and it takes me an hour to go through it just to look for typos, that's not really efficient for my client. And it's going to take me an hour and I might still miss something. Whereas if I put it through some kind of AI platform, it might find the typos in around 4 seconds. And I can just go through, make those changes in about 5 minutes, and I'm done. And I've saved time for my client. I've created a high quality work product. I'm less likely to miss something because 70 pages, human eyes get, they start to glaze over a little while. And with
Right.
AI, that's
Exactly.
not really a concern. And it's just shocking how fast it is to catch it. And obviously, the first 10, 20, 30 times I tried it, I double checked it. But now I have enough confidence in the systems where when I'm looking for typos, for example, I don't really need to worry about double checking. And then on the other side, sometimes I use it to actually learn and get better information on what's going on. Sometimes I have complicated tax issues happening, and I can turn to it to look for code provisions and things where I'm not familiar just to gain a better understanding. And really just a part of diligence. And it's not something where, it's the decision maker. It's really just a tool to provide me with more information so that I can be a better decision maker for my client.
Excellent. Yes. And that is the thing. Are you using straight out? I know you use different models, but did you build your own GPT that you can like put your documents in and work through, or are you going to the base chat GPT, Claude, any of those and using those as a tool?
I use my own GPTs, and I mean, I would suggest anyone try it at least. If you have the
Yeah.
premium version, there's no additional cost. It takes like 3 minutes to set up your own GPT. And I think I've got something like 8 or 10 different GPTs right now for different areas, different needs. And you could use it for literally anything. If you want a GPT for contract law or employment law, you can set up those GPTs. If you want a GPT for fashion, just to make sure what you're wearing is stylish these days, as we get older and older, that might be a concern. You can set up a GPT for that. And you can, feed
Yeah.
in what your preferences are and say, hey, I'm looking at this item. Tell me if this looks good. Or, if you're on Instagram, it's basically an ad platform now. You can see a sale for Black Friday and say, hey, can you, go look at this website, the current sale items, what my style is, pick out a few things for me. And for websites with like 3,000 items, I don't have the patience to go through that. I've got fatigue after the first
No.
page. And so I can outsource that to ChatGPT. Obviously, that's just an example of, how far it goes, but this is across industries. But we're at the point where it's so effective for the legal industry that we just can't ignore it anymore.
I agree. I agree. I have a friend that's using it. He's an author and he's building a GPT to learn his author style. And so that, as he's doing papers or summaries, they are in his voice. So it's really interesting. We built one for immigration attorneys that has all the immigration law in it. You just ask questions and it just gives you all the details. They are easy to set up and extremely valuable when it comes to saving time. I do agree with that.
Absolutely. And it's not perfect, right? Eventually, we'll probably get there. Eventually, it varies in terms of timeline. It might be 3 years, it might be 15 years. We don't know. Right now, it's a good starting point. And we can use that starting point to double check. If I ask it for code provisions, I have to go double check. That's part of my responsibility
Right.
diligence. And I had a scenario a little while ago where I was looking for the American Medical Association's opinions on something. And I asked it for citations, and obviously I double checked those citations. I found they were incorrect. And what I found is
Mm.
a series of false positives here, where I questioned the ChatGPT, said, "Hey, I'm not finding this. Can you, find something else? Can you find me the correct version, or am I making some kind of mistake?" And then it either doubled down on one opinion, or it said, "Oh, you're correct. Let me find you the other one." But then those opinions didn't exist either. So it's certainly not infallible, but it at least gave me a starting point where I could then go straight to those resources and go through the AMA opinions and find that the issue I was looking for actually wasn't catered to in the opinions at all. And that's probably why I was getting the false positives, because of the way I structured it and that I was looking for something that didn't
Okay.
exist. But it's my job to double check. And at the end of the day, it still saved me time to go through that process with ChatGPT and get those negative answers and use those to find that actual answer that I need.
That's an amazing time savings as well, instead of not having to go through books. A lot of the things that we need to research may not necessarily be electronic. So it is very helpful when you're going through that. So what are the ethical and legal implications for using AI in the legal space?
Well, I think there's a lot of ethical implications on both sides of it. On the first side is we have to be thoughtful about how we're using it. There have to be guardrails. And as I mentioned, it's not supposed to be the decision maker. It's supposed to supplement and double check and create efficiencies. But we can't rely on it as being the decision maker. That's our job. And we haven't outsourced that
Right.
just yet to AI. And our clients might outsource that, but we can't be outsourcing that. We're the final decision makers. And so we have the responsibility to make sure that whatever information we're using is appropriate. We have to double check it and we have to verify it, and our names are on the line at the end of the day. But on top of that, we really have to be thoughtful about confidentiality. And I focus on confidentiality rather than privilege because, from my understanding of the model rules, confidentiality is a lot bigger than privilege in terms of the restrictions and the thoughtfulness that we have to have. And so when we're approaching any kind of AI model, we have to make sure that all the information is confidential. And this comes in a couple flavors and forms of focus. One is if you're using something like ChatGPT, the default settings have you set up to feed your information into the model for training purposes. That's a quick toggle button. You can just turn that off. You go into settings, click a couple buttons, and it's no longer feeding the training mechanism. And so there's a little bit more security in the information that you're putting in. At the same time, I'm not going to put in any client information. If I'm putting in a contract to double check or proofread, I'm going to remove all the client names. And if there's anything identifiable, in a way, I kind of treat it like healthcare treats PII or PHI, where you want to make sure that that information is removed and anonymized before you put it in the model, even if you have tried to make it so that nothing is part of training, because we just don't know at the end of the day. We have to do our best, but we don't know what might happen. Even if the safeguards are in place, if there's some kind of hacking issue, we need to be thoughtful about that too. It might be beyond the settings and just focus on overall protection. And I think we also have to be thoughtful about communicating this with our clients and letting them know if we're using AI and making sure they're comfortable with it. Some companies right now I've heard at least, are saying in a blanket sense, they don't want um, any use of AI. But we're getting to the point where that might not be viable. Microsoft uses AI, Google is using AI, everything has AI built in at some level. And so we can't, as a blanket concept, remove AI. But if we're relying on AI for a lot of work and a lot of time savings, then it might be wise and important to disclose that to the client. And on top of that, fees change, right? A lot of us bill by the hour. And when you are saving a lot of time, it took me, 5 hours to draft a certain document. And with AI now, I'm able to do it in an hour and a half. I can't continue charging the client for 5 hours. I can switch my
Right.
billing model and I can make it fixed fee and make sure I'm capturing that kind of money if I believe that that's going to create efficiency and competitive advantage for me. But I can't bill for time that I didn't spend anymore. And so we have to be thoughtful about all of these things when we're using AI in terms of protections and guardrails. But on the counterpoint, I think we're starting to get to the point where it may be soon unethical to not be using AI practice in practice actively. And I'll give you an example. I'm pretty efficient with with a keyboard at this point. I've grown up in front of a computer. But if I
Right.
needed to write a 40-page contract and I told my client, hey, I'm going to write this with pen, that's going to raise some flags. It's going to take me 30 times as long. And if I'm billing by the hour, well, is that really ethical? I'd say probably not.
Well,
And I think with AI being the tool that it is, if we're not using AI right now and in the very near future, we may be hitting that same kind of transition point where we're not being ethical because we're taking too long doing something when there are much better and more efficient alternatives available.
that's been more of a service to your clients. I agree. And so the ABA has an AI task force right now as well. You were telling me about that. What are they looking into? Are they just looking for red flags? Are they seeing the ethics involved? What is the task force working on, or do you not?
Well, I don't have too much deep knowledge, but I do know that they released a model opinion, I believe, at the end of July. And that talked about the use of AI and thoughtfulness in AI. And they focused on very specific parts of the model rules. 1.1, which is competence, 1.4, which is communications, 1.5, which is fees, and 1.6 in confidentiality. And I mean, we touched on all of these just now, I believe. But
Okay.
in In Model 1.1, we have a duty of competence. And for most jurisdictions, from my understanding, that now includes being aware of technological advances and utilizing them. That might include, on one side of things, making sure that sensitive emails are encrypted. And on the other side, we could say that includes the use of AI because that is how you're competent. The communications, again, it might be wise to disclose to clients when you're using AI and how you're using AI. And in some cases, it might make sense to give them the choice. When it comes to things like document review for large scale litigation, if you have to fill a room with 50 lawyers and that document review is going to cost you $1 million, or if there's an AI model that might be close enough or possibly even better that costs you $100,000, can you reasonably actually charge the $1 million without offering the $100,000 option to your client? I would say we might be at the point where you can't anymore. If you're aware, first of all, you have a duty to be aware of these options. And once you're aware of these options, I think you might have a reasonable duty to disclose these options to your client when it can have that meaningful of effect on fees.
Yes, document analysis, that's a lot of things from what I understand attorneys are using it for, is the analysis of documents and then going back through, and it does save a lot of time. And you're finding that as well. So are you having it, do you use it also to like analyze old contracts, or are you just starting over again with thinking of the small businesses that you come in and help?
Yeah, I mean, I use it in all kinds of ways. I'll be honest. I put old contracts in, and it's not like one of those change the names things, but it's more like, hey, here's our scenario right now. Here's a contract. Give me a bullet list of things that you would suggest change it. And with something like that, it makes me more, I guess, the word I want to use is a curator, right? I can
Right.
dive deep into a document and I can structure everything from scratch. Or I can turn to ChatGPT and say, here's what we're looking for. And give me things that, you think are important or things that I might have missed. And I have the experience where I can use that bullet list and say, no, this isn't necessary. I don't agree with this. But actually, this is a really good point I hadn't considered. And it may be valuable in this context for this reason. And I can then ask ChatGPT to build out that provision for me, or I can build it myself if I want to be a little bit more thoughtful and diligent and just have it proofread and say, do you see any ambiguity in this provision? And are there any typos in this provision?
Excellent. Okay, great. Now, so thinking about that, how can lawyers ensure like accuracy? So I know you said, you're checking the citations, but the accuracy and the reliability of these tools, what do you find that one is more accurate over the other? Would an attorney ensure that what they're doing is accurate and reliable in the tool?
So I heard a simile recently, and it might have been the president of the ABA, it might have been someone else, but the way I heard it described is that AI is like a really intelligent intern that is very eager to please you and sometimes lies to you in furtherance of that. And I've kind of taken that to heart,
Okay.
right? If you have an intern, they may try really hard, but they don't have the necessary capabilities and information and experience to actually come out on an issue or resolve a problem or give you perfect information, but they give you a really good starting point. And I think that should be the focus for now. We will probably get to the point in, a few years where that intern is now as good as an associate or as good as a partner. But for now, I think it's wise to treat it kind of like an intern that doesn't have all the information and wants to get you an answer, but maybe doesn't understand where to look or how. And so at the end of the day, the accuracy is on us. Everything has to be double checked. When it comes to proofreading again, what I'm talking about is, a document that I've maybe drafted 20 times and I'm asking it to, go through and look for errors. Or I might ask it to do a first pass for errors and grammatical errors and punctuation errors and typos. And then I can go through, and as I'm going through, I can review everything else, but it just helps me ensure that I'm not missing something.
Okay, so you're using it as an assistant. I love that. I love the analogy of an intern that's overeager. That makes a lot of sense there. Do you think AI can predict the outcomes of cases?
Well, there are tools for that. Lex Machina is one that seems to be gaining a lot of traction, and that is a tool for litigation trends, and it's literally meant to predict the outcomes of cases. And I've never used it. I'm not a litigator, so I can't speak too much about it. If I go to their website, they've got testimonials from some pretty big firms out there and some pretty big companies. I've heard great things because I don't have, the litigation experience. I can't guarantee it's a great product or anything like that. But I'll say conceptually, I'm able to use AI for things like game theory. I'll set the stage, tell it, it's a game theory expert, and I give it a scenario. And I can say, give me the probabilities of each potential outcome, the likelihood of each potential outcome. And then I can use that as a baseline and say, okay, if I tweak it this way, what are the probabilities now? And you could use this for something like litigation, or you can use it for negotiation, or you could probably use it for your fantasy football draft if you wanted to, if that's your thing.
And I love that in the prompts, and you probably said this in your GPTs, in the prompts, what a lot of people are using GPT don't realize it's designed to be an admin assistant. You have to tell it what to be. So when you in your prompt, if you're looking to write sales copy, then you can choose someone, as an expert copywriter in the style of Dan Kennedy or something like that. So I love that you're giving it a role. And do you also, when you're doing these opinions, do you also include in your prompt, ask me any clarifying questions?
I do. I do, but I think the framework that you build out, the prompt creation, that's everything. That's literally everything. It's kind of like Google, right? You don't just type the word book into Google and expect to get the best book you've ever read. In the same way, we have to approach ChatGPT by creating a framework for its knowledge base, its expertise. Otherwise, it's just too broad. If we consider Google as the repository of all human information, ChatGPT is a step beyond that. It's the repository of all information with all reasoning capabilities necessary to interpret and utilize that information. And we can't just put in a basic one-liner asking it a question and expect it to spit out the response that is optimized for what we actually want. We need to tell it what its information source is, what its basis is, and give it some guidance on what we're expecting. And if we fail to do that, then we're not really treating the technology the way it should be treated and the way it needs to be treated. And we're not going to be happy with the outcomes we receive.
Yeah, it's like I'm an old programmer. It was garbage in, garbage out. You've got to have good data to go in to get the good data out. Agreed.
Absolutely. I love that. That's really the way to approach it here.
Yeah, exactly. Are there any regulations or standards of using the AI or is that something the ABA is working on?
I believe the ABA is working on it I would think that each state bar has the ability to come out on this issue, but my guess would be because the ABA has got a task force that is, it created with members at various bars across the country, that most states are probably waiting on the ABA to come out with its opinions. And I mean, it's such a big issue. And I think a lot of people say it's, world changing and life changing. And for some folks, that might be hyperbole. For me, I don't think it is. I think this kind of helps us step into the next phase of the information age. And so just coming up with premature regulations on hunches, that's probably not helpful. At some level, we have to see how this stuff plays out before we can start regulating it.
Right. Yeah, I do agree. I mean, it's so powerful in saving time and even like running through a white paper or something and say, what's missing or, I love the implications of how it can save a lot of time. I use it a lot and I applaud my team when they do. It's that sometimes you just get a writer's block when you're trying to put something out and it just helps you get around that. So, but never take the output as etched in stone. You always have to put an eye on it and edit it as you need to.
Yeah, agreed. I attended, there's like 20 years ago, I attended a talk, I think it was with Justice Scalia and someone else that he wrote a book with. And one of the principles they gave, again, paraphrasing, was write fast and edit ruthlessly. And I kind of took that to heart as a concept in writing and how I approach writing. And I think here, for like the first pass or the second pass, it's extremely helpful. You can have it try and write the first round in your voice, or you can write the first round and have it try to ruthlessly edit for you as that first pass before you continue on. And the way I treat it is a conversation. If I want to write a blog, let's say, I might draft the first part of the blog, tell it what I'm looking for, what I want, tell it to edit, and then it'll send me something back. And I'm not going to be happy with that. Again, just like an intern. And I'll go through that round and I'll edit it myself, send it back, say, this is more what I'm looking for. Can you edit again? And I might have 3 or 4 rounds with it back and forth. At the end of the day, it's taking me substantially less time than if I were to try and write it and edit it over and over myself. And I've arguably got a better work product.
Right. Right. I absolutely agree. And so the thinking about going forward, I mean, we've talked about technology advancements in the past have always like replaced blue collar jobs. And with AI, people are like, oh my God, AI is going to take my job. I think we're going to see, it's going to imply taking white collar jobs this time. So I think the change in technology is groundbreaking in what jobs it will replace. What is your feeling on that?
So I guess I would split my answer into 2 parts. There's 2 sides of the squeeze here. I think you're right. That the past couple 100 years, as technology advances, it's always been blue collar jobs that have been replaced. And there's a subset of white collar folks that cares and tries to fix it, and there's probably a subset that doesn't. And that might be why we are where we are in the country right now. This is the first time where I feel like white collar jobs are potentially going to be replaced. But I think that's an oversimplification to just say it like that. And that's why I want to separate the, 2 sides of a squeeze here. On the one side, we have folks that are, let's say, lower market folks that maybe were not going to hire the big firm or any firm. They now have resources to have contracts or file lawsuits on their own without the help of a lawyer. And so some potential jobs are being replaced. The lower level jobs that, I guess, how do I step back? There are folks that were never going to find a lawyer and they now have resources. And there might be some folks that would have hired a lawyer, but now have the resources to approach it directly. On the other side of this, potential squeeze is we have lawyers that are going to adopt AI and those that are not going to adopt AI, or at least not adopt it fast enough. And in terms of competitive advantage, I think the competitive advantage for lawyers having AI is unreal. If we're billing on an hourly basis, if something took me 10 hours to bill and I can now do it in 3, it now costs my client 1/3 as much. They're going to come to me more. I'll have much more volume in my business. I won't have to worry about, having a few bigger projects. What I now focus on is more volume because I can now handle more volume. In the time it took me to handle 1 client's needs, I can now handle 3 clients' needs, and I get the same income and I'm putting out the same, time and work, but I'm able to save clients so much money that they're more likely to come back to me, more likely to recommend me. And that's just on a small scale example, but I think it rings true. If I want to, buy a electric bicycle and I've got someone that's giving me a great product for $10,000 and someone that's giving me an equally good product for 3,300, why would I not go to the $3,300? Right? As long as it's
Right.
equally good. And that's the main issue here. And if the $3,300 product is somehow better than the $10,000 product, there's no way I'm going to consider that $10,000 product. That product will eventually go defunct. And I think that is what, as lawyers, we need to be focused on here. If you're not going to adopt AI, that's when you risk being replaced by. As long as you're adopting it, I think our jobs are fairly secure. And I think the nature of our jobs might change. We might become more like those curators that I spoke about a moment ago, where the way we approach law changes. But as lawyers, we're still going to be necessary. It's really when we fail to adopt this new technology, just like if I fail to start using a laptop and relied on writing by pen, I would get outsourced and replaced pretty fast.
Right. Exactly. I love the analogy there. I agree. So how can lawyers stay up to date on the advancement in AI technology and the potential impact on their practice?
I think we already have that responsibility, and it's part of competence and that's part of diligence. Just like, do we have a responsibility to encrypt our emails, or can we be using the free version of this or that? Probably not the latter. We probably have to focus on data security. And just in the same ways that we have to be focused on data security, whether it is through CLEs or hiring experts in the industry to come in and be our IT people and our data security people, in either of those ways, we're covered because we are either doing the work ourselves or we're hiring experts. In the same way, we need coverage here. People need to stay abreast of what's going on. They need to be aware of what the tools are, the efficacy of those tools, and how to use those tools. Now, they probably can't charge for learning how to use those tools, but they can charge for the use of those tools. If I, play around on LexisNexis's new AI case research platform, if I'm playing around on that, I probably can't charge the client for that. But for the time I use on there actually doing the research and using their AI tools, I can definitely charge for that. So it's just being aware of how it is. And sometimes you lose a little bit of money or lose a little bit of time, which in this case equals money, learning about what options are available and becoming an expert in it. And that's okay. It's a small cost to actually become the expert.
It is a small cost. That learning curve is will save you so much time in the future. And I love the way you equate that you can do three clients' work in the time it would have taken you one. So you in the end, you're going to grow your practice because of referrals and repeat business. So and very interesting way of looking at it. I like that. I know my listeners are probably going to want to connect with you and learn more about what you're doing. What's the best place that people can connect with you?
They can go to my website, which is capex.legal, CAPEX.legal. I'm also starting a YouTube channel and a little bit of an Instagram presence. And for Instagram, it's capex.legal, just like the website. So I'll be available all around. If you search for CapEx Legal, there's another one in India. It's not that law firm. It's the United States law firm. So just look for that.
Okay, great. This has been very interesting. I really appreciate your time today. And we'll make sure that your links are in the show notes. So anyone wants to reach out to you and check you out on Instagram or YouTube, they can certainly do that.
Cool. That sounds great. Yeah, this was so much fun. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining me today for this episode. As we wrap up, I'd love for you to do two things. First, subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. And if you find value here, I'd love it if you would rate it and review it. That really does make a difference in helping other people to discover this podcast. Second, you can connect with me on LinkedIn to keep up with what I'm currently learning and thinking about. And if you're ready to take the next step with a digital strategist to help you grow your law firm, I'd be honored to help you. Just go to lawmarketingzone.com to book a call with me. Stay tuned for our next episode next week. Until then, as always, thanks for listening to Leadership in Law Podcast, and be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss the next episode.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Leadership in Law Podcast. Remember, you're not alone on this journey. There's a whole community of law firm owners out there facing similar challenges and striving for the same success. Head over to our website at lawmarketingzone.com. From there, connect with other listeners, access valuable resources, and stay up to date on the latest episodes. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Until next time, keep leading with vision and keep growing your firm.